So today we're going to cover WallboardFX, our latest version, version 4. I'll take you through that. Ultimately, there's not a lot of new functionality as such in terms of features, but it's more kind of underneath the hood in testing and all that kind of relatively boring stuff, but very important. So in this case, there's not actually going to be a demo as part of the presentation, which we normally do. So probably a bit of a shorter session, which might be a bit of relief to some, because I do have a tendency to run over the hour, which I do always try to avoid, but somehow fail. But what I'll actually cover to kind of fill in some of the gaps, and because it's very relevant, is touch on the next release of PhoneView, which is version 7.0. Because I've added some UCCX functionality in there, which actually overlaps with Wallboard. So anybody who is a Wallboard customer or interested in our Wallboard software, this would be very relevant for them in terms of what Wallboard version 4 and PhoneView version 7 can do together. So the usual kind of agenda. So we'll cover the kind of basic house rules, a little bit about Unified FX. I'll give you a quick recap on the functionality I've added in the previous versions of Wallboard. We'll obviously go into the detail of what's new. So main top level item is the rubber stamp we've got for Cisco Compatibility. As part of that, we've added in high availability support, something that's been asked for quite a long time, but we'll finally be able to create a good solution together for that. The way we did it is we had to completely rewrite how we integrate with UCCX. That was no small feat, but we got some good benefits from it. And we also have an extra way to kind of get a data feed by also syncing with Finesse, which we'll touch on. Just helps with overall kind of performance and accuracy of the platform. Then, as I mentioned a minute ago, we'll go into PhoneView version 7 for a little bit, just to highlight a few features there. No demo, as I said. We'll just have some Q&A where relevant at the end. So the usual kind of house rules, the session's being recorded. You can email sales@unifiedfx.com afterwards for a copy. If you do have any questions, please use the Q&A panel and remember to submit it to all panelists. I've got Rajesh and Mohammed on the session today with me, so they can help out with any questions. In terms of Unified FX, if you're not familiar with us, I can use a quick rundown. We're a Cisco preferred solution partner. That gives us certain advantages and benefits compared to being just a simple solution partner. We've got a bit of a closer relationship with Cisco, etc. And really pleased to say that WallboardFX was the odd man out when it comes to Cisco compatibility. So it's kind of been on our kind of to-do list for a while. So it's great that we finally got there. So we've got a nice triple play stamp of Cisco compatibility across our products now, which we're really pleased about, obviously. If you're not familiar with us, one of our original product and kind of well-known product for associates with our name is called PhoneView. That is used to remotely control and manage Cisco IP phones, literally used by customers to manage millions of Cisco phones. So it's been heavily deployed and extensively used and tested. WallboardFX, which I'm obviously going to talk about today, the main theme of why we created that in the first place is we did see a bit of a missing piece in the kind of wallboard market for a relatively simple and effective wallboard scenario. It's really, really fast and real time. And really easy to install and maintain and administer, and eliminates all those kind of complex deployment dependencies. So that's really was the original objective for Wallboard, which a lot of our customers are pleased with. So obviously go over that in more detail today. Migration FX, that is used for swapping old phones for new phones. We've actually got a session on Migration FX in January. There's a kind of slide at the end. We'll kind of cover the other events that we've got. If that's interest to you, if you've got old Cisco phones to replace, you get RMA scenarios and things like that, you should have a look. The one recent development in that respect is the mechanism that we use, which we call zero touch, that automatically detects the old and new phone and copies the configuration over. We've actually finally got the patent through for that one, so it's a patented technology that we've implemented, which is good, makes it unique and stand out against other kind of provisioning type scenarios. But ultimately, just makes people's life easier when it comes to it. Now, where are we? So next slide, just a quick recap on the functionality we have added, mostly in previous versions, in version 2 and version 3 since the original release. Some things that we've done is a few extra statistics in terms of the abandon rate for calls, some new agent stats that we add in over time. So it's just based on customer demand, some things that I guess we're missing at the start. So things like time in state and reason codes, etc., have now been added in there. The agent view, you can now select which agents you want to actually show the agent state for. The actual wallboard display itself can also be embedded within Finesse, the kind of, the agent admin interface or agent display interface as a Finesse gadget. A couple of customers have done that. It's maybe not very obvious, we don't market it very heavily that we have that ability, but it is quite flexible and useful. It is also possible to apply some simple restrictions on the displays. That usually ties in with the Finesse gadget side of it. So if you push out the wallboard to a particular agent, you don't want them to start changing certain things or just fix them on a particular display, for example, so can't navigate between different layouts. You can customize the background image. We've actually got more customization capabilities in the pipeline, some of which we can give early access to people, but they're more of a kind of widget overlay. But what we're also working on is a ground up rewrite of the display page. So the plan is in the next release of Wallboard that you'll be able to just see things exactly the same way you see them right now, but we're planning to have a mirror of that and just raw JavaScript and HTML files designed in a way that can be just kind of edit the raw files, and it's nice and simple to kind of customize. Because we do have occasions where customers want to embed other data alongside, and we're just trying to find the best solution for doing that with the greatest level of flexibility. So that's kind of why we've not delivered that functionality before now, but that's something we're aiming for in the next major release. That's probably a 5.0 kind of time frame, but we do have some basic customizations available at the moment. If you've got any inquiries about that, you can just raise a support ticket and we'll tell you what is possible right now, and we can obviously set you up for testing out what's coming in the future. We also added some ways to mechanism to do a password recovery previously. We added in a kind of common request, which is the ability to copy displays. So rather than having to create all of that layout and thresholds and stuff from scratch, you can make a simple copy of it. So it's an enhancement to the admin functionality. And the agent view itself, we had a lot of customers asking for it to be displayed in a tabular form, as opposed to the kind of card or widget type mechanism that we started with. So you can now choose between those two. So that's just me going back briefly over the features side of it that was added in the previous releases. And now I can kind of move on to tell you about the new things that we've done. So obviously the kind of top level item is the Cisco Compatibility. Now, at the end of the day, this just means that we've gone through a process with Cisco to, test certain operations. So technically what happens is the testing company, which is called TechVision, they create a test plan that gets validated by Cisco, and then we execute that test with TechVision against whatever the most relevant and most up-to-date UCCX version is at that point in time. So we completed all that process only just about 2 months ago, and it takes a little bit of time for the rubber stamp it, so that came through a few weeks ago. And the main benefit is obviously peace of mind because we've been through that testing process. But it also means you get coordinated Cisco tax support. So a little diagram there that I pinched off of some of Cisco's documentation, just to show you the different options that customers have in terms of raising support. If it's something that's purely on our side, they can just come straight to us. If it's something that affects the Cisco component like UCCX, then they can come in that channel, and if it relates to our product, then Cisco can pull us in to the support ticket and dialogue, etc. So one of the things that we're able to do because of Cisco compatibility is to put the Wallboard application on the Cisco price list. It's something we're thinking about. Sort of weigh up the pros and cons. We do have one product, which is Migration FX, which is on Cisco's price list, so we know how to do it, and we've done it before, obviously. But we need to kind of decide if that's something that's useful to people. If anybody wants to comment individually or privately to us, if they see that as a good or a bad thing, feel free to give us your thoughts on that. I personally think it's a good thing. I know there's margins that Cisco take into the mix, etc., which can affect the price sometimes, but I think just the simplicity that you can order along with all the other components that is worth it. High availability support. So again, this is a top line item, important but not simple. The way that high availability works in UCCX in terms of an HA pair is only one of those systems can be the master, and effectively it will auto track which UCCX itself will decide and automatically manage which one is the master. Previously, we just connected to the single host, and if it was a master, great, it worked. If it wasn't a master, you'd have to manually go in and edit the host to point to the one that was a master, which is not too bad because that usually the change of the master in an HA pair doesn't happen too often. It's not something that's just happens off the cuff. It's something that has to be caused by an event, some kind of failure. But it is an inconvenience because it certainly would mean that our wallboard display would go offline when that flips state. That was the past, and where we are now is with that high availability support, we can now track which host is the master. We maintain a heartbeat connection with that. Well, we already did a heartbeat, but we never really did anything if the heartbeat failed. But now we can track if the heartbeat's there. If it gets missed for some reason, we can reevaluate which host we want to connect to. If for some reason either network traffic or some active closure, something in the middle, or the far end server closes the connection, we can respond to that. Or if the actual server itself tells us that it's not the master, so maybe it's still online, but through an admin interface or some other choice, it's been de-elected and no longer the master. Any one of those three things will trigger us to look through our list. Now, technically, the way the algorithm works, it works with more than 2 servers, but the way the implementation of HA works is typically only 2. But it's just a round robin exercise, so it'll just kind of go from one to the other and backwards and round again. The way you configure that is the server field. When you configure it up in WallboardFX, it's just simply a comma separated list. So instead of just putting one host in, you just put a comma in, put the second one in. So it's nice and simple to set up too. Now, one of the challenges that we've had and our customers have had on occasion is the fact that the fact that our integration didn't handle certain situations particularly well, mostly when it came to bad network connectivity or unstable network connectivity. So sometimes we might get spurious data in our kind of data feed because we didn't maintain that connection properly, and that would cause our handling of that to be invalid data or other kind of discrepancies in the statistics that you would see. So it's great that we've got this real-time, incredibly fast connection. And just to be clear and reiterate, WallboardFX is the fastest wallboard. Maybe other people have done this too now, but it certainly was the fastest wallboard because of the way that we connect to the UCCX system. Every other wallboard that certainly we were aware of, and is still the case that we've been told about, uses database polling. So they or API polling. So they just basically query an API periodically or a database every few seconds, every 5 seconds or so maybe, and that's good. It's 5 seconds isn't a lot of time, but it still is a bit of a delay. And when you're talking about some critical things like how long a call is in queue and if that's important to you, then timing is everything in some customers' environments. So from the beginning, we chose to use that CTI connection. But what that meant was we're working with something that's quite complex, something that hadn't really been used before for other wallboard applications. So it's kind of new territory, to be fair. So what we decided to do was to completely rewrite that integration, but not just for the sake of it. And the way that we did that rewrite is we managed to implement it in such a way that we can actually emulate the UCCX side of the dialogue, effectively emulate the UCCX CTI server part of the equation. And that means that in a completely isolated sense, we can test all that interaction, high availability mechanisms and, connection establishment and tear down, message sending and all these kind of things that happens via that CTI connection. Purely in code. Technically, you call it unit testing or integration testing, depending on what part you're working on. So we were able to not just rewrite the code, but write a whole bunch of tests around that code because of how we implemented it. And the key thing that enables, and this is like the modern trend for good software practices, is it allows us to apply continuous integration to that particular piece of code. So quite literally, whenever we make a modification to that UCCX integration code, and we, as a developer, you submit that change in, our systems automatically reevaluate that code. Don't just compile the code, they actually evaluate that code fully to make sure it doesn't break anything that was working before. And if we add some new functionality, there should be some new tests written with that as well. So it just helps us to ensure the most reliable and stable implementation for that integration by following that pattern. Because we were rewriting the integration with UCCX, what we actually did at the same time is we also decided to add in a synchronization mechanism with the Finesse API. Now, as I'm trying to elaborate on, we use the CTI connectivity because of its speed. For example, when we open up that CTI connection, literally the millisecond that an agent changes state, we get an event pushed immediately to us, which we then, handle, total, summarize, whatever we're doing with it, and then real time send that out to the browser display. So it means that you've got, sub-second delay from an agent state change to the wallboard display showing that. So that's why we went down this path with this particular integration. The downside to that is because we're effectively just counting these events as they come in. When you first install our software, normally it starts at 0, so it's got no other point of reference. And as events start to happen, it counts up. And then what our system would do is when it rolled over from midnight, it would then reset those numbers down. So you'd be starting the count for the beginning of the day, effectively emulating the way the statistics work on the UCCX side of the house. So the advantage to database polling is you're reading the data as UCCX sees it. So it's basically always in alignment with all your reporting, CUIC stuff, etc. The disadvantage from a CTI point of view is you don't have a point of reference because you're just counting, when you think you need to count and resetting when you think you need to reset. So because that was something that we also wanted to fix or improve, for those situations where, you restart the service in the middle of a day and you lose your stats and things like that, that it's counted for that day. It's not the end of the world, but it's also not too pleasant in some occasions either. So we were able to solve that by combining both types of data. So what now happens is we have a mixture of the existing event data that we've always had, but we also now combine that with polled stats. So every 20 seconds, this is configurable through a XML config file if you really want to change it. But by default, we query the Finesse API every 20 seconds for the agent stats. So because we get this incredibly fast real-time data, we don't have to pull the data too quickly. Whereas if we were dependent on the Finesse API for all of our data, then we'd want to pull that as fast as we could, which, is a little bit of a you hit that API every second, for example, which you probably could kind of do, probably would throttle out about 2 seconds, I suspect, if you're hitting it quite hard. But ultimately, the harder you hit that API, the more of a load you've got on the server and the potential for it to actually slow down each request if you try them too fast. So by us leveraging the eventful data, which is as fast as technically possible, and just in a longer period polling the agent statistics, and then having a decision on which one value to trust and use, that gives us the best of both. So we get immediate statistics updates, but we get periodic realignment checks. So if we, for some reason, you start up the system in the middle of the day, we'll start counting. And as soon as we get that first poll with the current stats on the system for that day, then all of the data on our side will be in complete alignment. And if something happens midway through and we miss an event for some reason, vice versa, maybe the HA pair flipped over or something like that, then it'll do that realignment. So best of both worlds is really what I'm trying to elaborate on there. That means that there's no need to wait for the next day for agents stats to total up. It will be immediately correct and synced up from that point onwards. If you do, now this does require finesse to be enabled on the UCCX system. However, we think pretty much everybody's got finesse in nowadays, but we are, as always, as backwards compatible as technically possible. So you don't need to have finesse. If you don't have finesse on your environment, we'll just be counting those stats as we did before, independently, with those same kind of restrictions that the stats have reset to 0. But I think pretty much everybody's running finesse now, so should all be able to take advantage of this data sync. So that was it in terms of the enhancements to Wallboard FX version 4.0. So it's mostly engineering under the hood. It might not seem like a lot of additional work or effort or upgrades to justify even a .0 release, but trust me when I say that the work we put into rewriting that UCCX connectivity was not trivial, and all for everybody's benefit in terms of getting the best of speed and performance and accuracy, minimizing load on the UCCX system, and all those kind of good things. But what we were also doing this year as well was additional UCCX integration. And here's the kind of ironic thing. When we did that rewrite of the UCCX integration, we did a bit of a clever trick. And rather than us writing that integration directly inside Wallboard and the two being, tied together hand in hand, we actually created the UCCX integration as a separate library, just like a private library. With a kind of service interface onto it. And what that meant was it could plug into Wallboard quite easily from a code point of view. It meant it could be isolated and tested really well, as I was touching on. But the other thing, which we only actually discovered kind of by accident, was that we can also pull that library into phone view. And then, so we had a little play with that middle of the year. It turned out into something a lot better than we actually initially expected. And what that effective, there's quite a lot of other things went into phone view in this next release that's coming out in January too. But in effect, from a contact center perspective, you now have UCCX agent data inside phone view. And the main benefit for that is for supervisors and UCCX administrators, that you can now have an admin level view, which is a little bit more flexible, a little bit more powerful than anything you currently get directly just from UCCX. So you're combining the endpoint functionality with the agent functionality into one feature set. And that's really what this UCCX agent support that we've added to phone view is about. Now, just a quick summary, that means we've got additional UCCX data that's now been added to phone view. So you get the agent ID of the person associated to each device, where they are, their extension, and their agent state. That agent state is that real-time state event data that we get from UCCX using our CTN connectivity. So that's crazy fast and accurate in real time. It's updated and included inside the kind of tree summary, so you can even see the kind of grouping and totals for each person in each state. You can actually log in and log out agents from phone view now as well. That's particularly useful if you've got test agents that you want to log in with and place calls to and answer and check how they route through queues and all that kind of good stuff. And because it's the same library, it also supports UCCX high availability. And you can set state for any UCCX agent. So technically from a supervisor's point of view, they could actually see all the agents within their team, choose one of them and change them from ready, not ready, etc. If they think if they're not changed their state themselves correctly. It also works for flexibility, as always. It works with multiple UCCX systems at the same time, basically because it works with multiple clusters and it's a one-to-one mapping from UCCX to a cluster. So that's the kind of general agent support capability. But on top of that, we also introduced this new concept of virtual endpoints. And what I mean by a virtual endpoint is we've effectively embedded a soft phone inside phone view. So rather than just controlling phones remotely, I wouldn't say just because other things it does too, obviously. Let's consider that as one of its main features of phone view is controlling a phone. We can now actually register an endpoint directly with audio and video capabilities. So that means now that's not just one soft phone. We can actually register many. We'll probably limit it to 10 to begin with because there's not really much practical benefit going above 10 other than scaling. That's another kind of aspect of this type of solution. But if you combine a virtual endpoint and that UCCX capability, then what it actually means is you can have a completely virtual UCCX agent. Again, even better for testing. So you don't even need to have a physical phone or a computer with a soft phone somewhere that you kind of take control of and have set up. You can do the whole thing inside one solution, and that means you can register the endpoint, you can then log it in as an agent, you can have multiple endpoints registered all within phone view, have some placing calls into a queue, have others as agents answering calls from that queue, etc. So you can effectively do end-to-end testing of a UCCX system. And then the final point I want to talk about on the phone view side, because I know this is a WallboardFX session and not really a phone view session, but I think this is relevant to share. It means that you've got all these testing capabilities of a UCCX system. So if you kind of combine WallboardFX and this new functionality that we've brought into phone view, it gives you kind of both ends of the spectrum from a Wallboard point of view. You've got the real-time statistics. We do not do reporting. It's not really our focus. That there's built-in systems and things you can do for that. So that's why we never went into that kind of area. But in terms of real-time data, you can't get much better than the way Wallboard works. And then when it comes to looking at the larger estate and manipulating and testing the UCCX platform, testing scripts, checking the routing, the overflows, and all those things that go in and out of contact centers, you can use phone view from that perspective. And you don't even need a physical phone to do that. So I think that's the main part of the presentation. I was going to leave this bit open for questions. There's not too many. I'll run through in a little second. Whilst we're kind of cover those questions, I'll just leave up the last couple of slides. So that is, I'm going to get a little note here. Yeah, let me just copy this into chat. Rather than you try and obscurely figure out those URLs, I'm just going to paste them in for you. So if you look in the chat window, those previous events that we've run with the YouTube links there are in the chat window. You can take a note of them if you want to go away and watch them if you've not seen them before and they're of interest to you, obviously. Some future events that we've got coming up is we've got a partnership with a company called Quasi who do customer engagement solutions, and they've got some clever stuff that they do with Cisco wireless networks, so they can detect people coming into retail outlets and other buildings and kind of make that part of the whole kind of customer interaction and proactively trigger things and add extra value to the customer experience. So part of that, we've actually done an integration with Quasi, or Quasi's done an integration with us, whichever way you want to talk about it. And we're going to do a session on the 19th just to demonstrate what that's about. And then in January, as I was mentioning earlier, got a recap on Migration FX. One feature that we're working on right now, which might be available, at least for beta testing by that point, is the ability to migrate device profiles. That's something that's come up on occasion. So anybody that's looked into our migration FX software and has got extensionability, I suggest you attend that webinar if you can, or get the recording afterwards, because we'll be touching on that to some level. And then the actual full release of PhoneView, it's in beta at the moment. You can get a copy of the beta if you want. But the full release of PhoneView is on the 23rd of January. We'll have a little webinar event for that. Okay, so let me just check if there's much in the way. Chat. No, just one question. Good question. So does the amount of wallboards deployed affect the overall performance of UCCX? And what's the recommended number of dashboards per UCCX cluster? Good question. So the way that our system integrates, previously we only ever had one integration, which was a CTI connection, which is actually very lightweight. I'll tell you a little bit about the scaling in a second. Now we have this second touch point, which is the Finesse API, which, as I say, polls every 20 seconds. So it's not a heavy request, but the faster you do request, that generally can have a negative impact on any system. So 20 seconds is absolutely plenty of times. That's got almost no impact whatsoever, plus it's customizable. In terms of the UCCX CTI connection that we maintain, I might struggle to remember this correctly. Yeah, if I remember, when we did the testing a few years back, I think it was about 2 megahertz load. So if you have one, yeah, that sounds correct. So if you get one WallboardFX instance with one connection of that UCCX CTI connection, it basically adds 2 megahertz of CPU load. Now, if you consider the gigahertz worth of CPU capacity even a simple server has, that's almost no impact whatsoever. In fact, it was one of the factors when we were looking into using the UCCX library in PhoneView, because usually from Wallboard point of view, you only need one server, which is one UCCX connection, and you can have as many dashboards or displays as you wish. So it doesn't cost you anything or load anything on your UCCX system for every display that you have, because it's all going through usually one instance of our WallboardFX server. So effectively, it's the man in the middle that's just taking the load off your UCCX. You've not got lots of individual queries going in. You've got one real-time connection. So there's no limit in terms of dashboards. The only thing I would say is all those requests are going to our Wallboard server. So if you're talking hundreds of concurrent displays hitting hours, that's okay. If you are going into the thousands level, you'd really need to beef up the server that Wallboard's running on. But I don't know many clients that have got that many client connections, if you know what I mean. That's not very common. Most people have a few large Wallboard displays, and then groups of agents and supervisors maybe that have got access. That's usually relatively trivial load on our system. And as I said, it's only got one connection to UCCX, using literally 2 megahertz worth of load on that platform. And if you're talking about multiple UCCX systems, then it's just the same load on each one. It's still, for our point of view, it's still a one-to-one mapping. You can only have our WallboardFX software talking to one UCCX system. That's on the WallboardFX side of it. So if you get two UCCX systems, and I'm talking about HA pair even, so it's two UCCX servers and high availability, would be one WallboardFX server. If you have multiple CUCM clusters and corresponding UCCX systems, then you need a Wallboard per cluster currently. That's not the case with PhoneView. PhoneView has been designed for multi-clusters from day one. Wallboard wasn't, but that's something we might do in the future. But again, that's not something that's very common. People with lots and lots of UCCX systems, and at the end of the day, you just need to stand up another machine, so it's not too much hassle. I think I've got one more slide. I think that's all the questions at the moment. So just in conclusion, if you have a valid license key, it's a free upgrade. It's now, we published it this morning, so it's now the default download. So anybody going to our website and taken a download for Wallboard, that should be version 4 by default now. That's the URL if you want it. I pasted it in the chat earlier. You just use your existing key. Just install the software on top of the existing installation. It'll take care of everything for you, updating all the files, etc. One thing we've not done yet, we had a little bit of an issue with it, and so we've not used it recently, is the ability to self-upgrade. So that's one of the mechanisms, and I would say one of the selling points of Wallboard. But unfortunately, the self-upgrade mechanism can get stuck sometimes. It can get stuck in an old version. We'll figure out how to solve that, but we've not implemented that as yet into Wallboard. We've implemented in PhoneView, but we've not carried that fix forward into Wallboard yet. So it'll be an incremental build on 4.0 or maybe a 4.1 release, and we'll get that self-upgrade mechanism unstuck, so to speak. But in the meantime, you do have to install the MSI on top. But you know, once we get the self-upgrade going, then back in action again, then if you want to, you'll be able to just let it upgrade itself. But to be honest, you know, even though we've added that self-upgrade flexibility at the beginning, I'm not really sure how many people actually have used it, at least not the automatic part of it. I'm sure they're quite happy to just click one button to install manually. Yeah, I don't think many people actually do completely automatic self-upgrade. I know I'd be nervous about it as well, even with the kind of testing that we try to put in the software. If you do want to explore PhoneView version 7 and that new UCCX functionality and get access to the beta version of it, please just email us at sales@unifiedfx.com and we can take you through that. So I think that's it for today.